If you can kick up into a handstand, but you can't hold it, there's probably nothing wrong with your balance. It's more likely to be this. Let me show you. Most people think that they can't hold a handstand because they're bad at balancing. But what's actually happening is this shape here. This we quite often call the banana shape. So we have ribs flaring, lower back arching, not pushing through the shoulders. If you're trying to balance a banana, you're not going to win that fight, no matter how much you practice kicking up, how much you practice those wall drills. Being able to hold the correct shape is fundamental to being able to hold a handstand. Yes, you might be able to hold on to the banana shape for a few seconds. You might even be able to hold it for longer than that. But fundamentally, this shape is not great for holding a handstand for a longer period of time. And it isn't going to help you with learning how to hold handstands in different shapes, being able to press the handstand or walk on your hands as well. So it's holding you back right now as well as in the long term. Now, the real problem actually starts from the ground up. When I'm teaching handstands, I like to teach them from the ground up. Now, instantly, when we look at this banana shape handstand, we think the arch in the back is the main problem, which yes, absolutely, that is a problem. And yes, we need to carry on working our hollow body shape, making sure that we've got ribs and tailbone tucked in, and I will go through that later in this video. But the main issue that actually causes this banana back problem is your shoulder position, which is why I like to teach handstands from the ground up, because if we can make sure we have the correct shoulder position, then it's actually much harder to find and hold this incorrect banana position. So when we look at my handstand here in this example, what's happening is I'm actually not pushing through my shoulders enough. We can see an angle at my shoulders here. I always relate handstands to building blocks. So if I had a tower and all my blocks were stacked really nice and neatly on top of each other like this, your handstand or the tower is going to stay up really nicely. In relation to a handstand, we think about this as knuckles, shoulders, hips, and then we could add in legs as well, although knuckles, shoulders, hips is the most important part of our handstand. Now, what happens when we don't have the push through the shoulders, and also I like to call it an open shoulder angle, so that nice straight line rather than having this angle here, what happens with the building blocks is they end up staggered. So yes, your tower or your handstand might stay up for a time, but it's not going to stay up as long as you would like it to, much like the tower. Other thing that happens when we are making, for example, a wonky tower is that if I stack my blocks going over one way over here, to make my tower stay up that little bit longer, I have to then compensate by perhaps moving my building blocks the other way, which is exactly what your body is doing when it comes to a handstand. So what we can see here is our building blocks with our handstand are staggered. We've got our shoulders that are not aligned over our knuckles. I like to teach shoulders over knuckles because that gives a better placement of weight distribution through your mid hand rather than being in the heel of your hand. We end up with this staggered position here because my shoulders are not exactly where they should be and I'm not pushing tall through them and they're not exactly stacked over my knuckles. What then my hips are trying to do is compensate for that, and my back does that job of compensation, trying to bring my hips over my shoulders here. So now actually when you do look at my handstand, yes, I've just about got my hips stacked over my shoulders, stacked over my knuckles, but I'm pulling this shape in order to create that staggered building block effect, so I can get some element of hold out of my handstand. As I have this angle at the shoulders, if I was to hold a nice true straight hollow position, my handstand would actually be at an angle here, and my body and my brain knows that I need to get up and over the top. So rather than pushing through the shoulders, what we're doing here is trying to compensate for this through arching in the back and bring the hips up and over the shoulder. How do we stop this from happening? What we want to do is practice our handstands and focus from the ground up. We want to have this open shoulder angle. When I'm referring to open shoulders, I mean a straight line down my shoulders into my torso. When I say closed shoulders, I mean that there's an angle there, which is then what results in either us not being able to hold our handstand or the banana shape. We can do any handstand drill to help fix this problem, but we need to pay attention in particular to our shoulders and what they are doing. If we can work on having this open shoulder angle and pushing through your shoulders and pushing that floor away as much as possible, then that is going to really help you be able to hold the hollow position that you want for handstands without having to compensate. So what I often see when people are practicing handstand drills is we lean our weight back to whatever surface we're using to help support us, whether it's the wall or a box. And we can see this starts to create not a massive shoulder angle like I had in that banana example, but we can see here that I don't have a complete open shoulder here. What we do really want to do actually is make sure we shift our weight forwards so that we have a really straight line from our torso through down our shoulders. There's a few things that we can look out for and try to feel here to tell us that we're doing the right thing. So we want to know what we need to feel during this, and we also need to know what this looks like. This is what it looks like, and this is what you would aim to work towards if you are videoing yourself. What it's going to feel like is you pushing the ground away. So much like when we do something like a squat, we're going to push the floor away with our feet as much as possible. It's the same feel with our handstand position. We're going to make sure our hands are completely flat. Make sure the weight is in your knuckles as well. If the weight is in the heel of your hand and you are sitting back towards the box, see how my weight shifts into the heel of my hand here. It's going to be much harder for me to just push through this, whereas if I've got all the weight in my middle of my hand, it's going to be much easier for me to push the floor away. Much like if I was standing on my feet and I leant back into my heels, it's going to be really hard for me to drive the floor away. Weight is in your mid hand, and then I refer to this as knuckles because then that gives you a really nice focus point to hone in on. So we're pushing through our hands and our knuckles like you're pushing someone away from you, or imagine that you're in like a movie and it's like that bit in Star Wars where you're trying to stop the walls from like closing in from you. That's how hard you want to be pushing, but we're pushing upwards. So then what's going to happen with our shoulders, pushing as much as we can, notice how your shoulders and your biceps are going to be right up close to your ears. Even if we're looking towards the floor, my ears are still going to be covered like you can see here. So my gaze is between my hands, but you can still see that my ears are covered here, as well as having an open shoulder. So there's 3 things to look out for to help us achieve the hollow position from the ground up and stop us from having that banana back position. Weight in your knuckles so you can push the floor away as much as possible. Open shoulders. If you struggle with overhead mobility, doing things like this really intentionally will help improve it over time. And if you work on your mobility and range of motion alongside this will also really help out with your handstands. And then last thing to look out for is that sensation of pushing up tall through your shoulders so that you're covering your ears with your shoulders and your biceps. If you're not sure what that feels like upside down, practice it the right way up first so you know what it feels like, and then you can apply this feeling to upside down, and the more time you spend upside down, the more familiar that feeling is going to become when you are upside down. So we've talked about shoulder position, and the other position we want to work on is the hollow shape. Now we can strengthen this with things like our hollow hold. What we really want to do is we want to practice this position correctly, the right way up first, before we start to apply it to being upside down. If we can get the correct shoulder position, this position is going to be much easier to hold when we do get upside down. So the main things to think about when we are trying to hold a hollow in relation to our handstands is to keep our ribs tucked in, our belly button tucked in, and our tailbone tucked in as well. If I go back to my banana handstand, what we can see is happening here is the opposite thing. It's happening because my shoulder angle isn't correct, but sometimes we can also have that correct positioning, but still we let our ribs flare out. So see how they're pushing towards the wall behind me, whereas actually I want to be pulling them in as much as possible. I'm also pushing my belly button out, and my hips are pushing forwards and outwards as well. Whereas what we really want to see is the opposite of this in our handstands. So let's look at this hollow position upside down. So when we're pressing our hollow holds, we're going to think ribs in, belly button in, so you can feel your back pressing flat against the floor, and then tailbone in as well. And that's the same thing that we want to aim for whilst we are upside down. We can practice this in pike handstands, handstands against the wall. Really, any drill that you're doing is great for handstands as long as you're doing it correctly. What we can see here with this straight shoulder angle, so my weight is in my knuckles and I'm pushing nice and tall so you can't see my ears. Now, the other thing then that we want to focus on is making sure my ribs aren't flaring out. So see how they're not pushing towards the wall. If I was in my banana position, my ribs would be close to the wall and you'd see big arch in the back here. It's easier for me to hold this hollow here because I have correct positioning in this lower part of my body. So thinking about our building blocks, it's easier for me to stack and create the blocks because my foundation or my first block is in the correct place. My belly button is also pulled in, and then my tailbone is also, or my pelvis, however you want to refer to it, is also tucked in as well. This is something you struggle with upside down. I really recommend just standing up and trying to find this position. Put your arms above your head and think about pulling your ribs in, pulling your belly button in and your tailbone in as much as you can, and then relaxing and trying to find that position again. And if you want to take that practice of finding that hollow shape a little bit further before you're doing your handstand work, it can be really helpful to use a resistance band, so you've got something to push into to give you that sensation of pushing tall through your shoulders to find the hollow position as well. What we can see here is the difference between, see how I've got this curve in my lower back here before I get into position. What we see is ribs flared, belly button out, hips not tucked in, and then as I get into position, see how then the band goes from being in a wonky line to a straight line. This can be really helpful for like a visual reference as well. Then I pull my ribs in, my belly button is pulled in, and also then I tuck my pelvis in as well as I go to then hold this position and I push tall into the band. It's easier for me to do this because again I've got this open shoulder angle here. This can be a really helpful tool for you to practice to stop the banana back occurring. One of the main reasons that we struggle to hold handstands is because of shape and positioning, not actually because of balancing. If you can find and hold the correct shapes and positions, then it's going to help out your handstand holds a lot. Practice these positions with intention, knowing that you've already built these shapes the right way up on the floor and on the wall, and then suddenly you'll start to feel yourself being able to find and hold these positions upside down and your handstand hold times increasing. If you'd like more help with your handstands, this is exactly how I coach them within my strength and skill one-to-one coaching or in my coaching community that I have on Swarm as well. You can find the information in the description below.